A black teen's backpack was thrown into the street by a cop who never imagined what lay inside: an official FBI badge. Officer Mercer, with a smirk and a boot, tried to crush more than just evidence. He tried to crush someone's identity. But Malik Thompson had a truth that couldn't be silenced, and a federal agent just minutes away. Wait until you see how this real moment unraveled in front of cameras, and why justice, this time, didn't look away. It started with a sound that didn't belong there: a sharp, wet slap of fabric hitting pavement. Not a gunshot, not glass, not even a raised voice at first. Just a backpack flung without warning, landing in a puddle by the curb, the contents inside shifting with a dull clatter. Officer Blake Mercer didn't look back at it. He had already turned, one hand on his belt, the other gesturing wide and commanding like he was directing traffic in a storm. "Step back, hands where I can see 'em, now." It was the tone more than the volume. Not alert, but accusing. Not concerned, but assuming. The boy, barely a man, stood completely still. His name was Malik Thompson, 18 years old, tall and thin in a way that made him look younger than he was. His hoodie was gray, damp at the sleeves, pulled over a light blue button-down that peeked from underneath, part of the uniform he wore at his early morning shift at the city archives. He had just finished delivering scanned documents across town for a bureau outreach program. He was going home. He hadn't done anything wrong. But he knew better than to move. He did exactly what his mother had drilled into him since he was 11. Stop. Don't argue. Don't reach. Don't explain until they ask. Stay still. Stay safe. So Malik raised his hands. Palms open, fingers spread, chin lifted, voice calm. "Officer, that bag has—" He didn't get to finish. Wind tugged at the hoodie's hem as something rolled from the open side pocket of the backpack, bouncing once on the concrete, then again, before coming to a slow spin on the street. A small, black leather case, rectangular, professional. It popped open slightly from the fall, the hinge creaking just enough for the interior to catch the light. And there it was, unmistakable. Gold and blue. An eagle, a badge, an ID card with a holographic seal. The letters at the top read, "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Gasps rose all at once, like the block had taken a single breath and held it. Phones that were already out tilted forward. A bystander stepped closer. A city bus idled behind them, its brakes hissing as if even the machine knew this moment needed to be quiet. Mercer blinked once, then again. His eyes flicked to the badge, then to the kid, then to the small crowd gathering by the sidewalk. And in a heartbeat, he did something very deliberate. He stepped forward, just once, and planted his boot directly on top of the badge. Pressed it into the damp concrete like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter. Like it didn't mean anything. Like it couldn't possibly belong to him. For a second, everything paused. Malik's chest rose and fell slowly. His arms stayed up. His mouth was half open, like he still wanted to finish that sentence. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pregnant with the knowledge that something had just happened, something wrong. Not loud, not violent, but undeniably, shockingly wrong. A woman near the corner whispered, "Is that real?" Her phone was already filming. A teen with a skateboard muttered, "Yo, did you see that?" Someone else said, "He didn't even check, just threw it." In the middle of the scene, Malik stood motionless, feeling his heartbeat in his teeth. His badge, his identity, his protection was under someone else's boot. He hadn't moved, he hadn't resisted, but somehow that still hadn't been enough. And deep inside, beneath the calm voice and the frozen arms, Malik felt something cold bloom in his chest. Not fear, not yet. Something closer to realization. He wasn't being seen for who he was. Not a student, not a government trainee, not even a person. Just a silhouette, a hoodie, a threat. And he knew, with stunning clarity, that everything after this moment would matter. Every word, every blink, every breath. Because this wasn't just a mistake. It was a statement. And the world was watching. Hatred never crashes through the door like a storm. It seeps in through the cracks, quiet and steady, until the room feels colder without anyone noticing when it started. And that's how it arrived here. It began in a tone. Mercer looked down at Malik, not just physically, but as if by design, and drawled, "What's this supposed to be, kid?" He said it like a challenge, not a question, like he already knew the answer, and the answer was lie. His voice wasn't loud anymore. It had dropped into something worse, casual dismissal. Like he'd seen it all before, and none of it mattered. Especially not the name on the badge, especially not the person holding it. Malik tried to speak again, slow and deliberate, but didn't get the chance. Mercer's hand was already on his shoulder, not guiding but forcing. He twisted Malik's body forward and pressed him down over the hood of the cruiser. The metal was hot, even through the fabric of his hoodie. The move wasn't violent on paper, but it was precise, designed to send a message. You're not in control here. I am. From the passenger side, Officer Kayla Ruiz hesitated before getting out. Her posture was uncertain, one hand on her vest, the other still near the handle. She was new enough to second-guess, but not brave enough to interrupt. Not yet. "You sure you want to go full stop on this?" she asked softly, walking up. "We should probably verify first. That badge looks—" Mercer didn't even turn to her. He smirked, just slightly, like her suggestion was amusing. Like the rookie still thought rules worked the same for everyone. "There's nothing to verify," he muttered under his breath. "It's not real. They print these online." He moved his boot again, not by accident, pressing it down a little firmer on the badge case, now streaked with grime from the street. As if the weight of his foot alone could erase what it was. But the truth was, Mercer wasn't a villain in his own mind. That would have made this cleaner. He wasn't acting out of some dramatic hatred that burned with fury. It was the quiet kind, the systemic kind, the kind that wore a badge and told itself it was just doing the job. 12 years on the force, 2 departmental commendations for proactive enforcement. A captain who tracked traffic stops the way other people tracked points in a game. A failed sergeant's exam, twice. A beat that used to be quiet, but now made headlines. And a worldview that told him if someone didn't look like they belonged, then maybe they didn't. In that framework, Malik wasn't a person. He was a type, a possibility, a risk profile. The hoodie, the skin tone, the neighborhood, all seen before the badge was ever touched. And so Mercer treated the badge like a problem, not a sign of trust. A threat to his narrative, a challenge to his authority. But Malik had a story too, one Mercer didn't ask about. 2 summers in the FBI Teen Academy, graduating at the top of his class. A letter from a special agent, hand-signed, inviting him to participate in a pilot program that allowed select students to work in logistics and outreach, couriers of non-sensitive bureau materials, shadowed by supervisors when needed. It was the kind of opportunity most kids never even saw, let alone earned. He carried his badge with pride, not for power, but for promise. It wasn't just laminated plastic and embossed metal. It was a statement from a system that said, "This young man matters. He is one of ours. Let him through." And yet here he was, pressed against a cruiser, hands still raised, unable to speak. "Hands where I can see 'em," Mercer barked again, louder this time. They were up, they'd been up, but that didn't matter. Malik wasn't being heard, he was being framed. Word by word, motion by motion, his image was being rewritten right there on the street, not as a student or federal trainee, but as someone suspicious. Then Mercer leaned in, voice low and close. His breath touched Malik's ear, and his words came sharp. "Fake Fed credentials are a felony, son." That word, son, wasn't fatherly. It was condescending, a verbal collar, a reminder of power, of who stood where and why. He said it like punctuation, like finality. Malik didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed just slightly. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He simply breathed in through his nose and exhaled slow, grounding himself in the training the Bureau gave him. Stay calm, stay sharp, let the evidence speak when you cannot. From across the street, someone called out, "Officer, it says Thompson. The picture is the kid." It was a woman, middle-aged, wearing a green scarf. Her voice was shaky but clear. She pointed at the badge Mercer was still covering with his foot. Others nearby were already holding up phones, red dots blinking, screens recording. A teenager crouched low to get a better angle. Another zoomed in on the ID through the gap under Mercer's boot. There was no denying what it was anymore. The name, the photo, the badge number, it was all right there. But Mercer didn't step off. If anything, his posture hardened. He didn't say a word. He didn't acknowledge the truth. Because sometimes hatred isn't loud. It doesn't shout or strike. It simply refuses to see you. And in that moment, Malik understood that the worst kind of hate was the kind that wore a smile, while pretending you were invisible. Anger came not like fire, but like pressure, dense and pulsing just behind Malik's eyes. Not explosive, not reckless, controlled. Contained the way he'd been taught by people who knew that control was survival. His fists were still open. His voice didn't shake. That was no accident. That was the result of long days at the FBI Youth Academy and longer nights reviewing scenarios with Special Agent Dana Whitaker, who drilled him on how to speak when speaking felt impossible, when the system around you looked less like law and more like a trap. "My supervisor is 2 blocks away," Malik said, slow and direct. "Call it in. That badge is federal property. Your body cam can see it." The words were a lifeline, not just for himself, but for everyone watching. He didn't yell, he didn't plead. He made a record, out loud, for the benefit of the phones now blinking red from all directions, and for the cameras built into the officers' chests. Mercer didn't respond right away. His thumb twitched near his radio, as if considering it. A flicker of protocol, but it vanished just as quickly. His jaw set tight, eyes narrowing as if every second passing deepened the threat, not from Malik, but from the optics, from the crowd, from the truth creeping into the edges of his control. Mercer had been in this kind of tension before, though never quite like this. He knew complaints, improper conduct, aggressive posture, failure to de-escalate. But those got cleaned up before they stuck. Internal affairs phrased things softly when there was no public heat. Reports got clarified. Union reps ran interference. Suspension, retraining, back to patrol. Nothing ever followed him far. But this was different. This was a crowd. This was live footage. This was a kid with a badge that wasn't fake. And somewhere in the back of Mercer's mind, he felt the shift. Felt it in the way people leaned in, not back. In how many phones were already up. How many voices were no longer quiet. But instead of stopping, he doubled down. "Turn around," he ordered, stepping close again. "Interlace your fingers. You're obstructing a lawful investigation." There was no investigation, just pride trying not to lose ground. Malik didn't move, not yet. His chest rose slowly, the only sign of the emotion tightening inside him. He wanted to scream, not out of panic, but from the sheer injustice of watching truth get stepped on twice, once literally under a boot, and again through the refusal to acknowledge it. Ruiz shifted near the car, arms half folded, eyes flicking between her partner and the teen. She wasn't new to the city, but she was new to this kind of moment. The moment where silence becomes complicity. Her training screamed at her,
Protocol first, verify credentials, preserve the scene. But Mercer's voice, low, confident, loaded with seniority, overrode it like background noise. "Sarge is gonna light us up if we cuff a federal courier," she muttered, not quite to Mercer, not quite to herself. He didn't even blink. "Then you didn't see a badge," he said flatly, eyes still locked on Malik. And with that, Mercer pressed his boot harder on the credential case, deliberate, measured. The gesture wasn't loud, but it was deafening in meaning. A chill moved through the crowd. The tension hung heavier now, like humidity before a storm. One woman lowered her phone briefly just to whisper, "He's doubling down. He's really doing it." And then it changed. A gray, unmarked sedan slid to the curb with smooth silence. No lights, no sirens, but unmistakable presence. Out stepped Special Agent Dana Whitaker. Sharp eyes, steady steps, dark windbreaker over tailored slacks. No badge flashed, no voice raised. She didn't have to. "Mr. Thompson," she said, just loud enough for the microphones of 3 phones to catch. "Are you injured?" Her voice didn't waver. It didn't accuse. It confirmed reality. Then she turned to Mercer, posture poised but commanding. "That credential under your boot," she continued, "is bureau issued. Step back and we'll verify through the Joint Task Force desk in 60 seconds. She didn't threaten, she didn't raise a finger, but she had authority that didn't need to announce itself. And suddenly, the entire street was holding its breath. Mercer didn't move. He looked from Whitaker to Malik, from the badge to the phones, from the woman in the green scarf, to Officer Ruiz, who now stood a little farther back, suddenly unsure whether she was witnessing misconduct or about to become part of it. A long pause stretched out, the kind of silence that weighs, that isn't empty, but full of eyes and consequences. For the first time, a trace of something broke through Mercer's posture. Not rage, not certainty, panic. Not the kind that flails, the kind that calculates. The kind that realizes the moment might already be bigger than him. That no matter what he said next, the footage already existed. And in that footage, there would be no edits, no context. Just a federal badge, face up, on concrete. And a boot refusing to move.
There was a stillness just before it broke. Officer Mercer's fingers hovered too close to his taser. Not yanking, not unclipping, just close enough to speak for him. The crowd noticed. So did the phones. So did Malik, whose breath had gone shallow. And standing at the edge of it all, composed like marble, was Agent Dana Whitaker. Her coat shifted slightly in the breeze. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move toward him. But her next words sliced cleaner than any command. "Here's what's actually going to happen," she said, calm as a scalpel. Mercer froze, not out of fear, but out of calculation. Whitaker wasn't bluffing. Her tone wasn't performative. It was informed, precise, federal. "You will remove your foot from federal credentials," she continued. "Officer Ruiz will notify your watch commander and log an on-scene verification. And you will remember your body camera is on, always has been." She didn't point at his face. She didn't step into his space. She pointed at the red blinking light on his chest, the lens that never looked away. "That footage already shows the moment the badge hit the ground," she added, "and the moment you decided to conceal it." There was a murmur from the crowd, subtle but sharp. Phones leaned closer, catching every syllable. A man near the bus stop whispered, "She's not playing," as the street held its collective breath. Ruiz shifted, her eyes jumping from Mercer to Whitaker, then to Malik. Her fingers hovered over her radio for a heartbeat, then moved with clarity. Her training, buried beneath hesitation, rose up. She keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is 24 Lincoln. We're on a possible federal courier stop, requesting immediate verification through JTF. Stand by for credential number." She knelt, carefully, respectfully, beside the soaked badge case. Her voice steadied as she read aloud. Name, Malik Thompson. Program code, Bravo 157. The radio clicked once. Then silence. The crowd waited. Malik kept his eyes forward. He didn't shift, didn't speak. He knew better than to celebrate too soon. 30 seconds passed. Then the line came back, clear, sharp, and on every active unit's channel in the district. Copy that, 24 Lincoln. Courier is confirmed. Badge and ID are valid. Release and apologize. The words weren't yelled, but they echoed like thunder. Mercer didn't blink at first. His expression didn't break. But a new noise rose, a shift in air, the sound of reality arriving. The ripple moved through the crowd in waves. Some laughed, short, disbelieving. Others murmured curses under their breath. But louder than any voice was the sound of truth taking shape. Malik let out a single breath, barely audible, half a sigh, half a release of pressure he didn't even know he was still holding. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was just the start of something turning. Mercer stepped back. At last. He pulled his foot from the badge like it weighed more now, like the leather had burned through the sole of his boot. The case remained on the pavement, streaked with oil and dust, a symbol of everything they all just witnessed. Proof, evidence, a verdict delivered. Not in a courtroom, but in full daylight. Mercer opened his mouth. He had to say something. "We're all just trying to be safe," he said, gesturing vaguely toward no one in particular. But the sentence landed flat. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an excuse. It was a line, thin, hollow, and too late. The phones didn't blink. They stared. Whitaker didn't respond. She didn't need to. Malik picked up his badge case slowly, inspecting it like it might fall apart in his hands. The corner was bent, the clasp scratched, but it was intact. It was real. It still bore his name. Ruiz remained silent, her eyes down. Mercer stepped back, then farther, the distance growing more symbolic than physical. He didn't shout, he didn't argue. He just exited, not from the scene, but from control, from the story, from the moment he could no longer rewrite. And the street shifted. No longer silent, no longer still, but changed. The power that had held its boot on the truth lifted, and with it came the weight of what people saw. The truth wasn't loud, but it was final. And now it was recorded. There was no dramatic music when it ended. No sirens, no headlines shouted through megaphones, no podium fists pounding with outrage. It was quieter than that. It was procedural, careful, precise. And maybe that's what made it feel so undeniably right. Before sunset that same day, 2 plainclothes investigators from Internal Affairs arrived to collect statements. No one needed to be reminded of what was at stake. The footage had already spread. Not just the clip of the badge hitting the ground, but the moment after. The boot that stayed, the hesitation to lift it, the authority trying not to look like it flinched. The next afternoon, under the city's transparency policy, the department released the full body cam footage, uncut. No narration, just timeline markers. 14:06:37, initial contact. 14:07:02, bag tossed. 14:07:45, badge visible. 14:08:11, Officer Mercer places foot on ID. The video didn't yell. It didn't need to. The silence around that timestamp said everything. The Civilian Review Board convened within 48 hours. It didn't take long. They referred the incident directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office for formal review under 18 U.S. Code Section 242, a statute about deprivation of rights under color of law. That phrase, so sterile on paper, felt sharp now, like a legal term that had finally found its real-world match. Then came the press conference. Mercer's captain stood in front of the cameras, stiff in posture,
formal in language, and reading from a statement he clearly hadn't written himself. "We were wrong," he said. The words landed with a quiet kind of weight. No one watching believed he wanted to say them, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he had to. Mercer was placed on unpaid suspension pending investigation. 2 weeks later, he was officially charged, not just for misconduct, but for obstruction of a federal process and abuse of authority. The department didn't rally around him. The union didn't launch a media campaign in his defense. This time, there was no safe narrative to retreat into. Meanwhile, Officer Ruiz submitted a formal request for transfer. She didn't disappear. She didn't run from what she'd been part of. Instead, she asked to be reassigned to the Community Response Division, the team tasked with rebuilding the trust her partner had helped to erode. And then, something unexpected happened. She showed up, unannounced, at the Youth Outreach Center where Malik volunteered on weekends. No camera crew, no press, just her and a paper coffee cup with both hands wrapped around it like a shield. "I'm sorry," she said. No qualifiers, no excuses. Malik listened, not because he had to, but because real change doesn't start with speeches. It starts with who's willing to sit across from you when the noise dies down. He didn't say much that day, but he nodded, and when she offered to volunteer at the next youth safety workshop, he told her the time and place. That was enough. A week later, Agent Whitaker took Malik to the bureau office to get his credential case replaced. The new one was stiffer leather, polished clean. She handed it to him without ceremony, but with a meaning he could feel. "Badges aren't magic," she told him, tucking the ID inside. "They're a promise, one we're supposed to keep, for you, for the people watching, for the ones coming after you." He didn't need to be reminded. He felt the truth of it every time someone looked at him differently now, not because they feared him, but because they finally saw him. And then came the town hall. Same auditorium, same stage. The mic was scuffed from dozens of hands, most of them angry. It was the same room where parents had shouted themselves hoarse and teenagers had wept into their palms after traffic stops that went too far, too fast. But this time, Malik wasn't in the back. He was at the podium. His voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. He told the room why he froze that day, why he didn't shout, why his voice stayed even when his ribs tensed and his lungs felt tight. He spoke of the math of trust, how every shove adds 3 years to a kid's silence, how every lie takes away a piece of belief, how a real apology, when it's honest, can take 1 day off that sentence, maybe 2. He didn't talk about the college letters that arrived that week, or the scholarship committee that called after seeing the clip, or the way his mother cried quietly into his shoulder that night, clutching his hoodie like she had when he was 8 and still afraid of thunder. Those things were his. He didn't need to share them to be heard. And when he finished, the crowd didn't erupt. It exhaled, like a room unclenching, like a city exhaling a breath it hadn't realized it was holding. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. Not yet. It was something more subtle, more necessary. Relief. The video kept circulating. Yes, it fueled outrage. Yes, it sparked applause. It was clipped and subtitled and quoted across every platform. But something else happened too. In the precinct briefing room, 2 weeks later, the same video played for a full room of officers. At the exact moment when Mercer's boot landed on the badge, the training sergeant paused the screen. He stood beside the image, facing the room, and he said, "This is the moment you think about what you're doing. Because in 5 years, one of these kids might be your backup, or your boss, or the only one in the room who speaks up when nobody else does." Silence, then a slow nod from the back row. Later that day, Malik walked alone down the block where it all happened. No escort, no cameras, just him. His new backpack slung over his shoulder, the weight of the badge against his ribs, familiar now, heavier, but earned. He passed the same gutter, the same bus stop, the same stretch of sidewalk where truth had once hit the ground and nearly been buried under silence. He didn't stop. He just kept walking. The street didn't belong to a siren, or a badge, or a voice shouting orders. It belonged to everyone's promise, to do better, to see clearer, and to remember.